My name is Rachel and I'm 34 years old. If you've ever been told by your own mother that you're not good enough, that you'll never amount to anything, and that she never wants to see you darken her doorstep again, hit that like button and subscribe because you're going to want to hear how this story ends. I grew up in a modest split-level house in suburban Cleveland, Ohio, where the winters were brutal and the summers stuck to your skin like a second layer of clothing. The house had that 70s architecture, all wood paneling and shag carpet that my mother refused to replace because she said it was a waste of money. The furnace would rattle and groan through those long gray Ohio winters, and I'd wrap myself in blankets in my small bedroom at the back of the house, looking out at the bare trees that lined our street, wondering if life would always feel this cold. My mother, Linda, was a woman carved from disappointment. At 58, she had the kind of face that had forgotten how to soften, all sharp angles and perpetually pursed lips. She worked as an administrative assistant at a medical supply company for 23 years, the same beige cubicle, the same complaints about her ungrateful bosses, the same stories about how life had cheated her out of something better. My father left when I was 7, and from that moment on, I became the convenient target for every frustration she couldn't voice to anyone else. Nothing I did was ever good enough. When I brought home straight A's in middle school, she'd say I was just trying to show off. When I made the volleyball team in high school, she complained about having to drive me to practices. When I got accepted to Kent State University with a partial scholarship, she told me I was wasting my time and that I'd probably drop out anyway, just like my father dropped out of everything that mattered. I remember the day I told her I wanted to study hospitality management. We were sitting in our cramped kitchen with its yellowing linoleum floors and the perpetual smell of burnt coffee. It was a Saturday morning in October, and the trees outside were ablaze with fall colors, reds and golds that seemed to mock the drabness of everything inside our house. She was reading the newspaper, not really reading it, just using it as a barrier between us like she always did. When I shared my dream of one day owning a bed and breakfast, maybe something charming near Lake Erie or in one of Ohio's small historic towns, she actually laughed. Not a warm laugh, not even a surprised laugh, but this cold, cutting sound that felt like a slap. She told me I didn't have the personality for hospitality, that I was too quiet, too awkward, too ordinary. She said people like us don't own businesses. We work for other people until we retire and hope we have enough saved to not eat cat food in our old age. I went to college anyway. I worked 2 jobs, one at the university library and another waitressing at a Bob Evans off the highway, where the smell of sausage gravy would cling to my clothes no matter how many times I washed them. I'd come home on breaks and holidays and the house felt smaller every time, the air heavier, my mother's criticisms sharper. She'd comment on my weight, my clothes, my choice of friends, my grades when she thought they weren't good enough, my grades when she thought I was trying too hard. The final break came when I was 26. I had graduated, been working in hotel management for a few years, and had been saving every penny I could. I met someone, a man named David who worked in commercial real estate. He wasn't the love of my life, but he was kind, stable, and he saw potential in me that my mother never did. When our relationship ended after 2 years, it wasn't dramatic or painful, we just wanted different things. But it taught me something valuable about what I deserved and what I didn't. I had started looking at properties, small ones, fixers that I could afford with my savings and a substantial loan. I found a beautiful, neglected Victorian house in Lakewood, just outside Cleveland, with lake views and incredible bones. It needed everything: new plumbing, electrical work, a complete kitchen renovation, and about 1,000 hours of cosmetic work. But I could see it, I could see what it could become. I made the mistake of telling my mother. I drove to her house on a cold March evening when the last bits of dirty snow were still clinging to the edges of the sidewalks. The house looked exactly the same as it had for decades, the same chipped paint on the shutters, the same crooked mailbox my father had installed before he left. Inside, the heat was turned up too high like always and the air felt stifling. I showed her the photos on my phone, pointing out the original woodwork, the beautiful bay windows, the potential of the third-floor attic space. I told her my plan to turn it into a short-term rental, maybe eventually a small boutique hotel. I was so excited my hands were actually shaking as I scrolled through the images. She looked at the photos for maybe 30 seconds. Then she set my phone down on the coffee table, that same scratched coffee table that had been there my entire life, and she said the words that would change everything between us. "Rachel, you're delusional. You can't even keep your own life together. How are you going to run a business? You're going to lose everything, end up in debt, and come crawling back here expecting me to bail you out." But let me make this clear right now, when you fail, and you will fail, don't come crying to me. In fact, if you're stupid enough to go through with this, you're not welcome in this house anymore. I won't watch you self-destruct. I won't be part of it. The room felt like it had been drained of oxygen. The furnace kicked on with its familiar groan, and I could hear the neighbor's dog barking through the thin walls. I remember looking at her face, really looking at it, and realizing that she meant every word. There was no anger in her expression, no heat, just this cold certainty that I was destined to fail. I stood up, grabbed my phone and my coat, and I walked out. I didn't cry, not then. I drove back to my tiny apartment in Cleveland Heights, the one-bedroom place with the radiator that clanked all night and the view of a brick wall. And I made a decision. I was going to buy that house, and I was going to make it work, not to prove her wrong, although that was certainly part of it, but to prove to myself that I could trust my own vision. The next 8 years were the hardest of my life, but also the most transformative. I bought the Victorian in Lakewood with a loan that terrified me every time I thought about the monthly payments. I spent 6 months doing renovations, learning how to tile bathrooms from YouTube videos at 2 in the morning, negotiating with contractors who tried to overcharge me because I was a woman doing this alone, making 1,000 decisions a day about paint colors and fixtures and furniture. I named it the Lakeview House, even though the Lakeview was really more of a lake glimpse through the neighbor's trees. I listed it on Airbnb, and my first guest was a couple from Michigan celebrating their anniversary. They loved it. They left a glowing review, and suddenly I had bookings. Then more bookings. Then so many bookings I could barely keep up with the cleaning and maintenance. Cleveland was changing, becoming hip in ways it hadn't been before. Young professionals were moving back. Tourists were discovering the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the Art Museum and the West Side Market. My Victorian house, with its carefully curated vintage charm and modern amenities, became a favorite. I added thoughtful touches, fresh flowers in every room, locally roasted coffee, recommendations for hidden gem restaurants that weren't in the tourist guides. I paid off my loan in 5 years. I bought a second property, then a third. I hired a small team to help with management and cleaning. I learned about LLC structures and tax optimization and hospitality software. I attended conferences and networked with other property owners. I became the person my mother said I could never be. And through all of it, 8 years of building something from nothing, I never called her. She never called me either. It was like we had both decided the other person didn't exist. I heard through distant cousins that she was still at the same job, still in the same house, still complaining about the same things. Part of me felt sad about the distance between us, but a larger part felt relieved, like I had finally removed a weight that had been pressing on my chest my entire life. Then 3 months ago something shifted. It was early August, one of those sweltering Ohio summer days when the humidity makes the air feel thick enough to swim through. I was at my office, really just a converted bedroom in my own apartment that I had upgraded to significantly, reviewing bookings and responding to guest inquiries. My phone rang with a number I didn't recognize, a Cleveland area code. I almost didn't answer. I get spam calls constantly. But something made me pick up. Rachel. The voice was older, uncertain, not quite as sharp as I remembered, but still unmistakably hers. Mom. There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, hear what might have been the television in the background, the same TV she'd had for probably 15 years. I need to talk to you, she said finally. Can we meet somewhere? My first instinct was to say no, to hang up, to protect the peace I'd worked so hard to build. But curiosity got the better of me. Where? We met at a Panera Bread near her house, neutral territory, the kind of chain restaurant that feels the same everywhere and therefore feels safe in its blandness. She was waiting when I arrived, sitting at a table in the back, and I was shocked by how much she'd aged. She was 66 now, but she looked older, smaller somehow, her hair more gray than I remembered, her shoulders hunched in a way they hadn't been before. We got coffee, that awkward dance of ordering and finding the table and settling in, neither of us knowing how to start. Finally she spoke. I lost my job, she said, staring into her coffee cup. They downsized the department. After 23 years they gave me a severance package and a handshake. I've been looking, but no one wants to hire someone my age. I waited, not offering sympathy, not yet. And the house, she continued, there's a problem with the foundation. It's going to cost $30,000 to fix properly, and I don't have that kind of money. My retirement savings aren't what they should be. I've been trying to figure out what to do. She finally looked up at me and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before: fear, vulnerability, the recognition that she needed something from me. "I heard you did well for yourself," she said quietly. "Someone showed me an article about you in a local business magazine. Young entrepreneurs in Cleveland. There was a photo of you in front of one of your properties." I'd forgotten about that article. It had been a small feature, barely 2 pages, but I'd been proud of it. "I'm not asking for money," she said quickly. "I just thought maybe you'd know someone who could help. Someone who does foundation work or knows about rental properties. I've thought about renting out the house just for a while to get some income." I sat there in that Panera Bread with its piped-in music and smell of bread and coffee, and I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, yes, still anger for all those years of criticism and coldness. But also something unexpected, a kind of clarity. She was just a person, flawed and scared and aging like everyone else. And I had a choice about what to do next. "The foundation work will cost what it costs," I said. "But renting out your house with those problems isn't safe or legal. You'd be liable if something happened." She nodded, looking deflated. "But," I continued, "I have a question. Where would you live if you rented out the house?" She looked confused. "I suppose I'd find a small apartment somewhere cheap." An idea was forming, one that felt both generous and petty, kind and also like justice. "I have a property," I said. "It's my newest one, a converted carriage house in Ohio City. 1 bedroom, fully furnished, really charming. I have a gap in bookings for the next few months. You could stay there." Her eyes widened. "Rachel, I can't afford." "You can afford it," I interrupted. "I'll charge you the going rate. It's $300 a night, so about $9,000 a month. You can use your severance to cover it while you look for work and figure out the foundation situation. It's a business transaction. You'll be a guest like anyone else." I watched her process this. $300 a night. $9,000 a month. The amount was intentionally steep, market rate for a high-end Airbnb in a trendy neighborhood, but steep nonetheless. I could see her doing the math, realizing that her severance would be eaten up in a matter of months. "That seems expensive," she said carefully. "That's what I charge," I replied. "That's what the place is worth. You said you didn't want charity and I'm not offering it. I'm offering you a rental property at fair market value." She was trapped and we both knew it. She needed a place to stay, her house was falling apart and her options were limited. And here I was, her daughter who she'd said would never amount to anything, offering her a lifeline that came with a price tag that would hurt. "I'll think about it," she said, but we both knew she didn't have much choice. 2 weeks later she moved into the carriage house. I prepared the property the same way I would for any guest: fresh linens, welcome basket with local treats, information packet about the neighborhood and house rules. I met her there to hand over the keys, showed her how everything worked: the smart locks, the thermostat, the coffee maker. I was professional, courteous, distant. The carriage house was beautiful, I'd made sure of that. Exposed brick walls, original wood beams, huge windows that let in gorgeous natural light. The bedroom had a queen bed with a hotel-quality mattress and view of a small garden I'd planted with perennials. The kitchen was tiny but efficient, with stainless steel appliances and granite countertops. The bathroom had a rainfall shower and heated floors. It was nicer than anywhere she'd ever lived, including the house she'd raised me in. "It's lovely," she admitted, standing in the middle of the space, looking around with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Yes," I said. "I'm glad you like it. Rent is due on the 1st of each month. You can pay through the app or by check. Let me know if you have any issues with the property." She nodded and I left, driving back to my office with a feeling I couldn't name. It wasn't satisfaction exactly, not the triumphant feeling I thought I'd have. It was more complicated than that, more layered. Over the next few weeks, something unexpected happened. My mother started sending me messages through the booking app, little things at first. A question about how to adjust the thermostat. A comment about how much she liked the coffee I'd left. A photo of a sunset from the bedroom window. I responded professionally, briefly, the way I would with any guest. Then one evening, about a month into her stay, she sent a message that wasn't about the property. "I walked to the West Side Market today. I forgot how much I love that place. Thank you for the neighborhood guide you left. The recommendations were perfect." I stared at that message for a long time before responding. "You're welcome. I'm glad you're enjoying the area." Another week passed. Another message. I had a job interview today. It went well. I wore the blazer you probably saw hanging in my closet, the navy one. I forgot I even owned it. This place makes me want to try harder somehow. Does that make sense? It did make sense. I designed these spaces to make people feel good, to make them feel like better versions of themselves. I just never thought my mother would be one of those people. She got the job, part-time administrative work at a nonprofit, less money than her old job but something. She told me about it in another message and I congratulated her. Our exchanges got longer, less transactional. She started to tell me about her days, the people she'd met in the neighborhood, the yoga class she'd started taking at a studio down the street. And slowly, gradually she started asking about me. Not the critical questions from before but genuine ones. How did I learn to design spaces so well? What made me decide on Ohio City for this property? Did I ever get scared taking on so much debt? I answered honestly. Yes, I'd been terrified. Yes, there were nights I couldn't sleep, wondering if I'd made a massive mistake. Yes, I'd failed at plenty of things along the way. I'd had guests who trashed properties, contractors who disappeared with deposits, months when the bookings were slow and the bills kept coming. One Saturday in late September she asked if we could meet for coffee. Not at a chain restaurant this time, but at a small independent cafe near the carriage house, one of the places I'd recommended in my neighborhood guide. The air had turned crisp, that perfect Ohio autumn weather when the humidity finally breaks and you can breathe again. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table by the window. She'd changed in the months since I'd seen her last, not just older but different. She was wearing clothes I didn't recognize, more contemporary, more colorful. Her hair was cut in a new style. She looked, and this surprised me, happy. I wanted to talk to you, she said after we'd ordered, her hands wrapped around a ceramic mug of tea. Really talk, not just messages about thermostats and coffee makers. I waited, my guard still up. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she continued. Living in that beautiful space you created, walking around this neighborhood, seeing how people look at the property and ask about it, seeing your success everywhere I turn. And I've had to confront something I've been avoiding for a very long time. She took a breath and I saw her eyes were wet. I was wrong. About everything. About you, about what you could do, about who you are. And I think I was wrong because I was so angry at my own life, at the choices I made, at the opportunities one didn't take. I saw you wanting more, dreaming bigger, and it terrified me because it reminded me of everything I'd given up on. So I tried to make you small. I tried to convince you that you couldn't do it because I couldn't do it. And that was cruel. That was unforgivable. I felt something crack open in my chest, not quite forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the possibility of it. You built something extraordinary, she said, her voice breaking. Not just these properties but a whole life, a whole career. You did it without any support from me, in fact you did it despite me actively trying to tear you down. And now here I am, living in one of your creations, paying you rent because I didn't plan well enough for my own future. And every day I'm reminded that you were right and I was wrong. It's not about being right or wrong, I said quietly. It's about you not believing in me when I needed you to. It's about years of telling me I wasn't good enough. I know, she said. And I can't undo that. But I can tell you now I'm so proud of you. I'm in awe of you actually. And I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry for every cruel word, every dismissal, every time I made you feel less than the incredible person you are. We sat there in that cafe, the morning sun streaming through the windows, the sound of the espresso machine and quiet conversations around us, and I felt years of anger start to loosen its grip. Not disappear, healing doesn't work that way, but loosen enough that I could breathe a little deeper. I appreciate you saying that, I told her. I really do. But this is going to take time. We can't just go back to being mother and daughter because you had a revelation. Too much has happened. I know, she said. I'm not asking for that. I'm just asking for a chance to know you, the real you, not the version I created in my head to make myself feel better about my own failures. Over the following months we built something new. Not the relationship we'd had before that was too damaged, too toxic. But something different, more honest. She extended her stay at the carriage house, getting a better job, one she actually seemed to enjoy. She started attending networking events I'd tell her about, meeting other entrepreneurs and small business owners. She even took a course on property management at the community college. And slowly, carefully we started spending more time together. Not as mother and daughter trying to force a relationship that never really worked, but as two adults trying to understand each other. She'd ask about my properties and I'd tell her the truth, the challenges and the victories. I'd ask about her new job and she'd share honestly about what it was like starting over at 66. She started helping out with some of my properties, nothing major, just coordinating with cleaning crews sometimes, or meeting a repairman when I couldn't be there. She was good at it, efficient and detail-oriented in ways I hadn't expected. One day she said almost shyly, "I think I finally understand what you meant about hospitality. It's not just about the physical space, it's about making people feel like they matter." Yes, I told her. That's exactly it. The foundation on her old house was eventually fixed, paid for partly with a loan and partly with help from a nonprofit that assists seniors with home repairs. She decided not to move back, instead she rented it out long-term to a family who needed the space. She moved into a smaller, more affordable apartment closer to where I lived and where most of my properties were located. Last month we celebrated the 10th anniversary of the Lakeview house, my first property. I threw a small party, invited some of my regular guests who'd become friends over the years, some local business owners, my small team of employees. My mother came, and at one point in the evening, I found her standing in front of a wall where I'd hung framed reviews and photos from guests. A decade of kind words and happy memories. "You did this," she said, gesturing at the wall, at the room full of people, at everything I'd built. "You actually did it." "We both did things we didn't think we could," I replied. "You started over at 66. That takes courage too." She smiled, a real smile, and for the first time in my entire life I saw something in her face that looked like peace. The story isn't wrapped up in a neat bow. We still have difficult moments, times when old patterns creep back in, when she says something critical without thinking or when I pull away defensively. But we're trying, both of us, to build something healthier than what we had before. Sometimes I think about that day in her old house when she told me I'd never be welcome there again, when she said I'd fail and not to come crying to her when I did. I think about how she ended up paying $300 a night to stay in a property I created, to sleep in a bed I chose, to live in a space I designed. There's a symmetry to it that feels almost poetic. But more than that, I think about how we both learned something important. She learned that her fear and disappointment didn't have to be my inheritance. And I learned that success isn't just about proving people wrong, it's about building a life that feels authentic and meaningful, regardless of who's watching or judging. My mother will probably never live with me, not in the traditional sense. But she exists in my life now in a way that feels manageable, even occasionally joyful. She's teaching a class at the community college now, Reinventing Yourself After 50, and she talks about her own journey with a humility and honesty she never had before. And me, I'm still building. I have 7 properties now, considering an 8th. I've hired 12 employees. I've been featured in 3 more publications. I wake up most mornings excited about the work ahead of me, about the guests I'll host, about the spaces I'll create. The Cleveland winters are still brutal and the summer's still sticky and hot. The city is still rough around the edges in places, still figuring out its identity in a changing world. But I've made a home here, not just in the properties I own but in the life I've created, one careful decision at a time. My name is Rachel, I'm 34 years old, and my mother once told me I'd never amount to anything, that I'd never be welcome in her house again. She was wrong about the first part. And as for the second, well, she's welcome in my houses now as long as she pays the going rate. And somehow, that arrangement has taught us both more about respect and value and worth than a lifetime of free access ever did. If you made it this far, you're part of something rare. Most people scroll away when things get real, when stories don't wrap up perfectly, when the emotions get complicated. But you stayed. You listened to every twist, every painful moment, every small victory. That means something to me, and I hope these stories mean something to you too. If they do, if you find yourself thinking about them after the video ends, subscribe to the channel. There are more stories here, more truths about family and forgiveness and finding your way when everyone says you can't. And if this one resonated with you, if you felt seen in Rachel's struggle or understood that complicated dance between hurt and healing, just type, "I stayed until the end" in the comments. I read every single one, and it helps me know these stories are reaching the people who need them. A like on the video helps too, more than you might think. It tells me to keep sharing these real, messy, beautiful stories about what it means to rebuild yourself when everything falls apart. There's another story waiting for you, one that might hit even closer to home. Click on the next video, settle in, and let's walk through another life together. I'll meet you there.